Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Rethinking Oracle Database Warehouse Modernization with Actian. Today, I'm going to be a presenter along with Greg Hale, um, and we'll handle Q&A during the event if I'm not presenting. So feel free to enter the questions via the Q&A function. If you're having technical difficulties, you can also use the chat function to ask us questions, and we'll get to them all at the end of the event, anything we don't cover in chat. So with that, I'll get started. A little bit about myself. I've been at Actian about 3 years. Prior to that, I had various roles, including 13 years at Oracle, where I did lots of database migrations from legacy data warehouses to Oracle. So hopefully I can answer any questions you may have about the differences between Actian's data warehousing products and Oracle's. A little bit about Actian. We've been around as Ingress originally for nearly 30 years. We were last spun off as Actian around 12 years ago by Computer Associates. We have more than 3,000 customers, more than 350 employees. Our customer satisfaction rating is pretty high at 95%. And we own a number of patents, including ones we're particularly proud of related to database performance. And we're used by 24 of the Fortune 100. At the bottom of the screen, you can see some of our major customers. Xerox is one of them. We'll be talking about them. They actually used to be an Oracle customer before becoming an Actian customer. And Refinitiv is a really good example of a customer who's very performance sensitive. We actually form the basis of their Icon service, which is information for stock traders, which has a performance requirement of no more than 20 milliseconds for even their most complicated queries. And Actian's technology is able to address that with ease. So why Actian? Many organizations choose Actian because of our reputation for high performance and enterprise scalability, which normally translates to lower cost of ownership, especially against Oracle, as most of the customers I speak to tend only to have, one maybe or part-time DBA, as opposed to traditional databases requiring DBA teams. So it runs really fast, which means you can run the same workload on a small machine to finish at the same time, saving you running costs, especially on the cloud, or you can just run the workload faster and you can use your time for more productive use. It includes automated management, so you can, if you have a farm of Oracle, Actian instances, the whole server farm can be administered from one console. It has the flexibility to be deployed on premises or in multiple clouds, which I'll talk to a little bit later. And Greg will be telling you a lot about how we could lower the risk of actually deploying Actian solutions, whatever you're coming from. And he'll also be telling you about the free data migration assessment facility capability we're offering. The traditional Oracle Exadata data warehouses are an appliance-based approach, which don't give you all this flexibility to expand that you'd have with a more open approach. It can lead to siloed data. Expansion can be difficult. Performance can be limited. It can be quite a hard database or data warehouse to tune. I'll talk to an example of that a little bit later. And expansion cost is a real problem for a lot of the customers. If they want to add capacity for a short duration, that can be hard to do with an appliance approach compared to a cloud-based approach. So early generation of cloud data warehouses basically promised to be easy to deploy, scale to petabytes. You only you only pay for what you consume, and they provide easy data integration. A lot of them have failed to deliver on this promise. The reality is, the promise is actually delivered by Actian, but the reality with the non-Actian approaches is they're not really easy to deploy. They can be very difficult to manage. They're very complicated to administer and tune. Um, Scalability can be limited especially if the SQL is particularly complicated, and they don't always give you the opportunity to elastically expand and contract with your usage as most modern cloud data warehouses do. Um, and a lot of approaches, like with Oracle, particularly when we're talking about data integration, you have to buy something like Golden Gate to be able to do proper ETL or data integration to multiple data sources. With Actian, we've included that capability within our cloud data warehouse platform. So what is our cloud data warehouse? It's called Actian Avalanche. It's a hybrid cloud data warehouse. It's a fully managed web-based solution, and it's totally ACID compliant. It's an MPP solution, so it scales linearly across multiple machines. Also scales linearly within an SMP as well, using vector processing, which I'll talk to in a little while. So it's known for scale. It's known for flexibility of deployment, both on premises and multi-cloud, which leads to superior total cost of ownership. If we've done lots of comparisons to other alternatives in the cloud, and Actian Avalanche still is 3 times more cost effective than Redshift, for example, and 9 times more cost effective than Snowflake, which are two popular alternatives, and it offers comprehensive data integration built in. So what makes Actian Avalanche so fast? So it really is a combination of multiple capabilities. I'll talk to a couple of them. The key one is vectorized processing. Traditional data warehouses or databases process data one row at a time. So if you have a calculation to do that uses 2 column values, they will basically process one row, do a context switch, process the next row, do another context switch, etc. So all this can take a while. What Avalanche does with this vectorized processing is to operate on an array of data at a time. What that means is we can basically, using Intel's high-performance computing instruction set for vector processing, we can basically see all the registers in all the cores in a system. So say you have a 64-core server, we can basically, from one instruction, access all the memories of all the other cores, load up one array of data into all the cores, which might be 100 or 1,000 elements, and process them all in a single CPU instruction. So no context switches. So that basically makes the vector processing database 100 to 1,000 times faster than alternatives. Another key reason Actian's Avalanche is so fast is that we make very intelligent use of memory. So we don't just optimize to keep the database in database elements that are active in RAM. We actually optimize them and compress them so they fit easily in L1, L2 cache on the chip. And what this means is you're able to access the data 100 times faster than it would be in RAM. Again, another reason that Actian's database technology is so much faster than alternatives. Especially in the Hadoop environment, handling updates can be very challenging. So if you are using a commodity cluster based on Hadoop, we can actually handle singleton updates coming into the database almost continuously. We have customers with 50 billion of these coming in every day. Sorry, 5 billion of these every day on a 50 billion row database. And the database handles it really well. It doesn't slow down the people doing the queries. And because it's a columnar database, there's no indexes to maintain. It basically can handle those updates really efficiently. So they're the primary reasons why Actian's Avalanche is so fast, both on premises and in the cloud. I mentioned earlier that data integration is built into the solution. So whatever ETL or ELT solutions you're already using, like Talend, whatever, Actian can easily connect to those. Avalanche has connectivity to all your popular data sources, including streaming data, applications such as Marketo, NetSuite, Salesforce, you name it. We have 200 plus ready built connectors, and also a universal connector to connect to any data source that isn't already that we don't have a template for already. In terms of getting data out of Avalanche, it uses standard APIs such as JDBC and ODBC. And we also have some custom connectors allowing you to do data science very easily and also access all the existing reporting and BI and visualization tools you already have. And when it comes to moving to the cloud, most organizations are on a path to take advantage of the cloud, if not move there altogether. Small companies find it very easy to get started in the cloud. Larger organizations, more traditional organizations, tend only to have a small portion of their data in the cloud. Right now, according to Gartner, the Fortune 100 companies only have about 21% of their data in the cloud today. So they'll be taking many years to move to the cloud. So we basically give you the capability to move to the cloud at your own pace. And on your way there, to avoid data getting siloed, we can help you connect multiple instances of Avalanche, whether they be on the cloud or on premises, using a single query capability. It's called a federated query. So a single SQL query can span multiple data locations, and we intelligently break down those queries into subqueries that go to the various sources, and we push down the predicates like where clauses or filters, etc., to those remote locations. So we only bring back the relevant part of the data, minimizing the strain of that data on your network and giving the maximum performance in the process. So just I'll share with you some of the customers who moved from Oracle to Actian. One example is a French retailer, Kiabi. Kiabi has more than 20 million customers. They have 800 stores across France, and their database consists of more than 800 million records. They use Actian to analyze their sales performance. They're a fashion retailer, so customers' tastes change pretty rapidly, and they vary from region to region, and they basically need a very powerful analytics product to allow them to decide which promotion to offer to which customer set at any one time. They used to use Oracle, and they did a comparison of their existing Oracle data warehouse to Actian Avalanche, was Actian Vector at the time, and found Actian to be 200 times faster than their existing database, and they've been a happy Actian customer ever since. This example of a banking client, a large global bank, had to do a reconciliation of 30 systems to meet their regulatory requirements, which insists that they know within a certain time the balance at the end of the day across all their systems. And this used to take 6 hours using the traditional approach, and because they need it's a regulatory requirement that would result in a fine if it didn't get it done quickly. Actian was able to achieve the same reconciliation in 1 hour 40 minutes. So with a lot of other benefits in terms of speed, and this is another example of a customer who selected Actian over Oracle. A New York-based life insurance company also did a comparison. We had their head-to-head comparison took about a week. Had 4 full-time Oracle engineers tuning the system against Actian's sales engineer, who had to do hardly any tuning. And the result was, on average, Actian was about 19.4 times faster than the Exadata system it was being compared to. In terms of another customer, again, I mentioned it on the first slide, Xerox is a happy customer. Xerox did a comparison when they first selected Actian compared to Exadata. Again, a lot of tuning, but on the Oracle side, but Actian Vector was way faster. And in their test, you can see that from this chart. With execution time, the black lines are the Actian performance numbers versus the blue lines, which were Oracle's numbers. So in conclusion, Actian's giving you the opportunity to move away from Exadata, which most customers are finding to be pretty expensive and inflexible. And we give you the opportunity to run on commodity hardware in the cloud or on premises with very, very flexible, elastic scalability, both in the cloud and on premises, and a much simpler system to manage, or you don't need a DBA team to manage an Actian instance. Just one part-time person is usually enough. With that, I'm going to hand you over to Greg Hale, who's a solutions director in our customer success and professional services team, to talk you through migrating to Actian. Greg, are you there?
Thank you. I am here. Thank you, Pradeep. Good morning, everybody. My name is Greg Hale. I run customer success and professional services in EMEA. I've got a background in services. I've worked for a number of SIs in my past for over 20 years. They include IBM, Capgemini, and most recently HCL, who have purchased Actian, and that's how I came to work for Actian. So I ran data management and BI teams. So our practice is in most geos. We have dedicated teams in the US, EMEA, and APAC, so we can support global customers. But we generally supplement our PS organization with local partners. We're not a massive PS organization, so we provide advice and product knowledge primarily. We have a well-defined and evolving process that we get feedback from each customer engagement. This is our migration methodology. And before we start, we perform a free migration assessment that generates a project plan and estimate for the migration to any Actian products. Our methodology, as I mentioned before, has all the tasks, dependency, and owners to identify whether the ownership rests with the customer, Actian, or a partner for the responsibility to execute that task. We can provide a data warehouse architecture assessment, which looks at your as-is state of your ingestion processes, how you store and process data, what your consuming applications are doing, and the workloads, and make recommendations for you. We try and be as agnostic as possible in that respect. Our people come from a number of our competitors. So our SVP of product engineering was a product manager for Teradata, for example. Our VP of sales engineering came from Netezza, and lots of our engineers have come from Oracle. Pradeep's one of the people that did come from Oracle, as well as Snowflake. So we know the market very well, and we know their products very well. So hence we feel we're well qualified to migrate. And we've built a tool called Actian Assist, which I'll be going through shortly, that allows you to automate as much of that migration as possible. We also have ETL and ELT tools, Data Connect and Data Flow. Data Connect is now part of the Avalanche platform called Avalanche Connect to help with any ingestion should it be required. But obviously, we'd probably reuse your existing data pipelines. Next slide, please, Pradeep. So our best practices are shown below, and obviously migrating to a new platform is generally a very daunting task. Lots of these data warehouses have very deep roots, and cutting those roots and planting a new tree, to use an analogy, isn't an easy task. We've done a number of successful migrations in the past, and out of that we've formulated our best practices. So probably the first thing I'd recommend doing is make sure you understand your stakeholders, so identify them and understand what their expectations are in terms of expected outcomes. Any missed requirement from a stakeholder means probably you're not going to deliver the outcome they want, or your plan is missing some vital tasks. So you want to make sure they're brought into any project you're running and that they support it. Very, very important for success. We would thoroughly recommend a phased approach. A big bang migration of something very large is pretty risky, and implementing a new technology and replumbing that makes people nervous, and most people are nervous of change. So I'd recommend choose a relatively easy quick win and implement as quickly as possible and learn from any mistakes. Every organization is different, and that way you'll get good stakeholder buy-in. I would suggest that you categorize your data. Not all data is equal, and you need to identify what data must be migrated, what can be purged. Most warehouses have a lot of historical data that's not even used, and maybe you need to purge it because of GDPR constraints, and what can be archived. And use the migration as an opportunity to do that housekeeping and eliminate data you don't want to, that you don't need. I'd understand the migration tools very well. All tools have limitations. No tool is a silver bullet. So whilst we can automate a lot of the tasks, some things will have to be done manually. You need to be very clear on what those manual tasks are and how large they are. Performance is one of the key reasons people choose Actian's products, and I think to establish clear performance baselines and how you're going to measure those will enable you to measure that success criteria that you probably need. So make sure you have something that's realistic, i.e. the load, the concurrency, the volumes, the query throughput, etc., to allow you to do that comparison. Have a well-conceived rollback plan. Vitally important in case of the unexpected. I once had an unscheduled building maintenance task that took the power out to a building during a migration and had to implement the conceived rollback plan. So that's a slight lesson learned for me. So these things happen, so make sure you have a well-conceived rollback plan. And lastly, conduct thorough validation testing. Really, you need to test. Ensure the data has been technically reconciled, as well as business reconciliation via running reports. All your upstream and downstream integrations work. And we typically recommend that customers do a period of parallel running to ensure all the outputs are correct. And if you can automate the comparison of outputs, even better. Next slide, please, Pradeep. So our approach has 4 phases: our assessment phase, the actual migration phase, the replumbing of ETL and BI, and then the testing and go live. I'm not going to cover this in too much detail, just give you the highlights. So the migration phase, we perform due diligence, understand the scope in the pre-planning. We want to understand that full environment, the schema, the data pipelines, what your consuming applications are, what kind of processing you do in SQL, any security requirements, what the volumes are, the workloads. And the intent is to fully understand the customer environment, the data warehouse environment, and build a valid project plan that captures all the requirements and the dependencies. The next phase is this automated schema and data migration. So we'll use automated tooling as much as possible to migrate the DDL and the data. And we typically expect about 90 to 95% of that to be automated. You can tune some custom objects, as we have a language recognition tool. We use Antler for that. and that can be tuned, and you can build new grammars in Antler. But there will be a manual conversion required, and that will have to be done manually. So you can either engage ourselves to do that, or more normally an SI to do that manual conversion. And we work very closely with HCL for that. So the tool can be used to migrate the data as well, and that can either be a full set or a sample set of data. It's parallel threaded to optimize performance, but that performance is always obviously dictated by the size of the pipe going from your premises to cloud, and you could use something like Azure Data Box or AWS Snowball appliances if need be. The ETL and BI migration requires a replumbing of the data ingestion jobs as well as the consumption BI tools. So we'd recommend that you'd analyze what kinds of connectors you're using, and they'll generally need to be changed and recompiled to make sure that they work. For the BI tools, you'd have to change the connector from whatever your BI of choice is to one for Actian Avalanche, and we support numerous BI tools. And we typically take a copy of the BI repository and repoint that. We suggest you do parallel running of the ingestion jobs into the warehouse to make sure the results give the same output, as well as obviously doing the same thing from the BI tools. So for testing, this is really down to how you do your testing, and we'd follow your normal test cycles, and that would take us through SIT, performance testing, operational acceptance test, UAT. We would always recommend, where you can, to do a period of parallel running, and generally UAT runs on the back of that to check all the outputs are the same. Training, again, depending on the timescale of the project, we would recommend that you do just-in-time training, so do it as late as possible to make sure that you know the differences between your existing warehouse and Avalanche. And we offer support on site for 1 to 3 months to ensure smooth transition. So that's our approach. Actian Assist is the tool. You can see there's a few screenshots here to highlight what the tool does. Okay, and now we're going to give you a quick demo of Actian Assist, our migration tool set. Okay, here's the tool set. So this is the workbench of the tool set. It's a migration, evaluation, and conversion utility. And it allows a number of different sources. I think we have a slight technical issue here, bear with me. Hopefully Pradeep's resolving this. Yep, thank you Pradeep. Which includes Oracle, Netezza and Teradata. So let's select one of the sources, and we'll select Oracle as the source and Actian Avalanche as the target database. So once you've done that, you can select Browse to open some source DDL that you will have exported from your source system. And here we're picking up 3 files that we like to import and try and convert from Oracle into an Actian database. So they're the 3 files in the Explorer browser window. If we then migrate DDL, that loads the files into the tool. And these files will contain anything like schema definitions, could be stored procedures, whatever. And we can then evaluate those. So if we hit the evaluation button on each of these 3 files, and we'll start with the bottom one, that one will migrate over, and it migrates about 85%. So it has some errors. The middle one doesn't migrate particularly well, only 58%. And the top one has migrated completely and has perfectly migrated. There's 2 icons there. The middle one, as you can see, if you click on it, takes us to the stored procedure, the middle procedure that did not migrate. And if you look at that, that is a poorly formed, incomplete procedure in Oracle. So that wouldn't have even run in Oracle. So we can't migrate that one. The top one, if we look at that, is a perfectly good Oracle procedure, well formed, looks very good. The bottom one, you can edit it here to make sure it returns a correct value if you choose, but you can see it's missing at the bottom there where the cursor is a return statement. So you can edit it here to put in the return statement. So it has an inline editor to allow you to edit things in the tool as well. So we can retry the evaluation, and you can see now that it's converted completely at 100%. So we have 2 of 3, and we can delete the poor store procedure that we wouldn't want to migrate anyway. The next option is to convert those. So we said we've chosen we can evaluate them, now we convert them, and that will convert them into Actian procedures and SQL statements, and they've both converted successfully. There's 2 new icons now. The first icon lets you view the converted procedure, and the last icon lets you load the DDL into the target database. And as we haven't set up a live target connection, we can't do that right now, but you can store that for later use. You don't have to convert everything in one go. You convert things file by file, and you can convert things schema by schema in order to phase your migration. And we recommend that you do schema by schema generally. So you can download the converted SQL and save those locally, as I said, if you don't have a live connection. And the download's complete. And then you can go and have a look at the files or the converted procedures as they're stored. So you can see here the converted procedures are perfect Actian procedures, and those will execute exactly as did the Oracle procedures in Oracle. Okay. So the arrow to the left here lets you drill down to a conversion summary, and that lists the number of statements and how many of those statements have been converted. So in this particular example, there are 12 statements. They all migrated successfully, and there was no issue. If there was an issue with any of those statements, it will highlight where that issue occurred. So you can go and see where the issues occurred and what the problem is for remediation. So to summarize, we can provide a free migration assessment to build a realistic plan. That starts with migration pre-planning, where we identify stakeholders and establish their requirements in terms of schedules, when they'd like this to happen. We then have a kickoff meeting, and we'd introduce the stakeholders to each other. Sometimes they're not known to each other. They each have their own requirements, and they each have their wish in terms of a plan, and we try and align all stakeholders on an initial project plan. We then do some analysis on your existing database. If that's Oracle, it'll be on the existing Oracle database, understand the sizing, the usage and the complexity, what the schemas are, whether we can map data types, etc., views, store procedures, and we use our evaluation tool for that purpose. You also need to understand the applications that consume the data warehouse data, and they'll have potentially dependencies amongst those things as well. So we'll need to understand that if we're going to particularly move in a phased approach. You have to understand what the interim states will be and whether they work with the business. So we need to have a workshop to understand the connectivity to apps and the various constraints. We look at how data is loaded into that data warehouse in terms of source systems and any current ETL processes, or that there may be real-time feeds coming in via something like Kafka. And you have to understand what the window is to load data. Most legacy warehouses run batches overnight, but that has to finish by a certain period of time. So we'd have to understand what those are. The intent then is to build a migration plan. So we would, as an output of this free assessment, we'd have a migration plan, a first cut one, and that would also estimate the effort and the cost for the migration, which is incredibly important. So this assessment summary produces a plan as an output and the effort to deliver it and the costings to do so. So that's what we're offering as a free migration, and typically it takes 1 to 2 weeks. Thank you, Pradeep.
Okay, so we can thank you, Greg. That was really good. We can. I've been able to answer a couple of questions from the Q&A. If you have any other remaining questions, please feel to ask us quickly now, or you can always email us at asa@actian.com if you have general questions. Hopefully you found this interesting, and we'll be interested in other events by Actian. With that, I think we can conclude here. thank you everyone for joining, and have a good day.
Thank you. Good day.